Hey, joining us on the CloudCast today is Dr. Petersen. Let me introduce him. Dr. Petersen is a world-renowned psychologist who used to teach at the University of Toronto. He is no respecter of your pronouns. He's famous for his podcast, Thinking Out Loud, where a couple psychologists discuss their dreams and their biggest fears out loud. He runs a website called cyberstoned.org, where he talks about how the internet is a drug that's stoning us to death. He's a member of the website Goddess Bewusstsein, a German word ironically run by this thing called the English District. Goddess Bewusstsein is an organization dedicated to preserving the memory of Friedrich Schleiermacher. Hey, we're delighted that we bagged you for the Cloudcast. Dr. Petersen, could you give us a psychological evaluation of the Lutheran Church Misery Synod?
Schizophrenic and clinically depressed.
Oh boy, get straight to the heart of the matter.
Hey, it's great. David Petersen, not to be confused with Jordan Petersen. Really good to have you on, Pastor, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. What's the weather like? It was always cloudy and depressing when I was there. Does that infiltrate your mood?
It does, but then we have these 15-minute windows of sunshine where everybody's happy. So we're in one right now. And so luckily I'm staring at a computer screen over a microphone.
There you go.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Missing my 15 minutes today to talk to you.
How do things change for you when the school year at the seminary ends? You have quite a few guys coming from the seminary to church, and that's a big part of your population, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It doesn't really change because I don't know when you went to seminary, but all the students are now married and have children. And they don't go home for the summers. So it's just kind of a 12-month program, really. So there's a shift because some of them graduate, and then new ones come in, but it doesn't really slow down, I'd say.
And you have a school there at Redeemer as well, is that right? Besides
Right.
besides the parish, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So how many kids are in your school?
It's either 60, I think it's 60 or 65. So
Okay.
not too big, but it's only about, I can't never remember how old it is either. It started about 8 years ago. So it's been growing kind of slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hey, we're so glad you're on today, and we got Matthew chapter 9 on the table. We'll talk about other things along the way. But Josh, was there anything right out of the gate that fits kind of contextually that we need to think about with Matthew chapter 9? How does this fit into the big picture? You're always big picture.
Well, yeah, so Matthew 8 and 9 go together. It's a sequence of miracles, 9 or 10, depending on how you count. The one here in Matthew 9 with the woman who's bleeding for 10 or 12 years and Jairus' daughter. And the sequence is you've got 3 miracles, and then Jesus calls disciples to follow him. That's the sequence. So starting in chapter 9, we've got the 6th miracle, which would be the paralytic, and we're gonna finish that out before the apostles are listed in chapter 10, which will be the second discourse, if you will, in Matthew.
Okay. So the 6th miracle is the third of this second set of 3: calming the storm, healing the man with demons, and then healing the paralytic. I can't remember. Is there anything kind of progressing as we work through these miracles? So we had the leper, the centurion servant, and then Jesus heals many. Then you get your discipleship call in chapter 8. Now he's calming a storm, demons, paralytic. And what's notable, I guess, maybe this is something to think about. Only when we get to chapter 9 and he heals the paralytic, the people marvel, right? They say, they glorify God who had given such authority to men. This is really, this is a broader kind of appreciation for his authority than he's experienced before.
Yeah, so my first question for Petersen is verse 5, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say rise and walk? So what's easier?
I think it's easier to say arise and walk, actually. I think it's completely counterintuitive. I'm dead serious.
I 100% agree with you. What I have in my hands, this is the Lutheran Study Bible. Have you ever looked at the note on this verse? It's hilarious because it's so condescending. Here's what it says. It says, which is easier? And it says, obviously, it was easier to declare someone forgiven than to tell a paralytic to rise and walk. Like, obviously, you idiots.
Right. Except that's not whoever got in trouble for saying rise and walk. There's no danger. There's no risk. And in fact, he doesn't get in trouble for saying rise and walk. He gets in trouble for saying your sins are forgiven.
Right. Yeah. So my joke with this is, okay, so what's easier? What's the scale? So are we going on a syllabic count scale? So we could count out the words.
So well, I always thought that the riskier move was the rise and walk, because that's the one that's verifiable, whereas the other ones are your sins are forgiven is not a verifiable.
Right, that's exactly the problem. So because it's verifiable, there's no risk. If you say rise and walk and he doesn't, we know you're fake, right? If you say rise and walk and he walks, we know maybe that you're a charlatan, or you're a miracle worker. But if you say so, either I can still dismiss you. I mean, we have miracle workers now. Charlatans have always existed. The bold claim here, I think, and the one that offends them, and I think still offends today, is this forgive sins. I mean, think about the I can never remember the name of what's the big charismatic conservative denomination, Assemblies of God. So if you think about the Assemblies of God, having miracles, I think that people find that inoffensive. But when they walk into our churches and we say the absolution, they get mad. So that's why I think it's harder. But
yeah, that's great. And you're making me think about the range of reactions to the forgiveness of sins. So on the one hand, the kind of generic, and this always bugs me, we haven't dived into this yet the way I'd like to, but the kind of generic, your sins are forgiven without thinking about particular sins, is always a little bit hazardous, because it allows you to confess the ones you want and be absolved of the ones you want, and so on. The thing that's especially offensive is when you say, yeah, this guy who did this awful thing that we all know and saw, and the consequences of it are still with us, his sins are forgiven. That's really scandalous, right?
Right. Well, and the arrogance of a man saying this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they don't like about Jesus doing it, and that's what they don't like about us doing it.
And that's in the Markan parallel, right? They ask, who can forgive sins except God alone? So I think on an ontological scale, which I think really the question is, it is more difficult to forgive sins because that involves the shedding of blood, where Pharaoh's magicians can do the miracles up to a point.
Yeah, that's great with Pharaoh. That's those are such interesting miracles. They can only do destructive miracles. They can't do the miracle he needs, right? Hey, right. They need him to stop the snake on the ground, not make more snakes, right? Not make more blood, not make, all they can do is contribute to the chaos and death in Egypt, right? Some foreign magician comes into your court and turns your water into blood, and you tell your magicians, do something about this. You mean stop it, right? Not add more. So, yeah. But those are weird. Are those miracles? Jesus only has the fig tree is the only negative miracle that Jesus performs, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
I like this idea from Augustine that the miracles are restoring creation. They're natural, right? It's not Hogwarts. We don't put wings on pigs or something. Or I think it seems like the language is it speeds up time. Have you heard? Am I getting that right?
So like turning water into wine, we've got kind of a hastening of the natural process that would happen if there were grapes involved, and it would ferment over time. Yeah.
Right. And sort of bringing people almost to the last day early with the restoration of their bodies and so forth. But the fig tree one doesn't fit that pattern.
That's interesting. I was thinking about that with the calming of the storm just recently. About the way that the way that the wind and the waves want to break out because Jesus is here. It's like the wind and the waves are like, oh, it's just like the demons say in the very next episode. Is it right before it or right after it? Yeah, right after it. The demons say, "Do not torment us before the time, right? So Jesus shows up and there's this anticipation. The wind and the waves are busting out, and Jesus stands up and he's kind of like, okay, not this. We're not hastening time when it comes to this thing. We're not speeding to the end
Yeah.
right now.
Well, I think that's what happens at the crucifixion in Jerusalem when the dead get up. I think they're confused. They think it's the last day, and they're never mentioned, right? They've got to be assumed bodily into heaven. I can't believe they all fell down dead and had to be buried again. I mean, maybe they did, or maybe they crawled back into their own graves like vampires. I don't know.
What are we told in Matthew 27 that they walked to the holy city, right? Isn't that how
Yeah.
Matthew records it? I mean, so you could take that as walking into heaven.
Yeah. I mean, it almost has to be. Just again because nothing else is said of them. I have a friend that thinks Lazarus was assumed into heaven. That he's not dogmatic about it, but he likes this idea, even like Jairus' daughter, that if you're raised from the dead by Jesus, you can't die again. Which, maybe he's just picking up on this wandering Jew thing. But, the wandering Jew is Lazarus. You know that legend? Did you not know that?
No, I do. So I know the legend. I never pictured that it was Lazarus. I was telling my Bible study about it last week, and they thought I was off my rocker.
Yeah, no, it's explicitly Lazarus in what I've seen. So it's this idea that, it's not a Jewish legend, it's a Christian legend. And this idea that Lazarus is raised from the dead, but he doesn't become converted and he can't die. So he just has to wander the earth.
And that's behind like Jesus saying this generation will not pass away until all these things take place.
I don't know. I don't know what's all behind. I mean, who knows what's behind Christian legends? Probably not much from the Bible, but.
Well, yeah, I know, but because that's a difficult saying. That's a difficult saying of Jesus, because you have to, and I've always taken it as the passion, because all of these things in the end times take place during our Lord's passion. So in a literal sense, they do take place.
I've always, that's certainly possible. I don't mind that. I have usually understood it as this generation, meaning this kind of people. So this generation is the contemporary generation that is not eternal and is always obsessed with itself and its own time. And so those kind of people will always be here until the last day.
Yeah, a wicked and perverse generation.
Yeah.
When do we get one that's not, right?
Yeah, but yeah. But anyway, the idea of, it is interesting what happens. Are they just resurrected sort of part way? Their bodies aren't perfected like Lazarus or Jairus' daughter, only to die again. And it seems more tolerable to imagine that in the case of Jairus' daughter, or, the Zarephath widow and these other people who weren't dead very long. I don't know why that's easier to imagine, but it just seems like it is. But the Jerusalem people really seems weird.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the other data points that are relevant, like, for instance, Old Testament resurrections. So
Yeah.
the Elijah and Elisha raising the dead, and it seems like there's this distinction that I've wanted to make between resuscitation and resurrection, which it seems to be an important distinction, because if you are raised back to the same life that you were living before, in some sense, it hasn't done you any good, right? If
Right.
you are not raised out of that dying life, but again, that same sort of limitation is true also of all these miracles. So this paralytic gets up and walks, and eventually he's not going to be able to walk again, right? Because he's
Right.
going to be crippled or die, right? Yeah, it does seem like it'd be a cheap trick for Jesus to play on somebody.
Well, the one that's really weird is Elisha's second resurrection, because Elisha's dead after it happens.
Yeah.
The man's thrown into his grave by happenstance, and he's like, it's
Right.
so absurd. We don't know the spiritual condition of that guy either. He's just raised from the dead. Like, hopefully he was given another chance to repent if his soul was condemned. I mean, that would be pretty cool, but that's just speculation.
That reminds me, there's this Graham Greene short story called "The Second Death." It's a really great story, and I'm hesitant to tell you about it because the ending has got a twist to it. So you got to read it for yourselves. Either of you ever read that before, Graham Greene?
I haven't.
Okay, so the premise is, basically the same question, like what happens when you are healed by Jesus? What happens when you experience, the miracle of, say, having your sight restored? Um, uh, and what if you don't believe, or what if your experience of believing is the same as it is for everybody else, where like you go through seasons of doubt and concern and despair and anxiety and guilt, right? I mean, and that's one of the things that's so striking to me here. I like it better in Mark, that the paralytic comes so early in the gospel, Mark chapter 2, which allows me when I'm teaching on Mark to say the forgiveness of sins is central. But here, the forgiveness of sins is kind of like a buried weed. It feels to me. It's like in the middle of all of these miracles, here's the forgiveness of sins.
Yeah.
Which what's that like for this paralytic? He can walk, but he's also heard the Son of Man say to him, "Your sins are forgiven."
Yeah.
Which one does he care more about? Right.
Right. Well, and I love this too. This be courageous, right? That the forgiveness of sins actually gives you courage, and I think it's the courage to be paralyzed, because I mean, obviously obviously, right? Just like the Lutheran Study Bible, obviously they are coming here not for forgiveness but for healing, and I mean, I do think probably that is what they're thinking, right? They want him to be healed, and they want to see if Jesus can do it. They have faith. Who knows what that means, even really? I mean,
Right.
I'm not disputing they have faith, but how mature is their faith? How informed is it? So they come, and then be courageous. Your sins are forgiven, and then of course and then it's immediately to the man blasphemes, which is, I don't know, the whole thing is interesting. But yeah, I think it's be courageous to remain paralyzed. And so I always go exactly like your point. The most important thing is the forgiveness of sins. And if you have the forgiveness of sins, you can endure these crosses. And then that particular cross is lifted. But as you say, for how long, or who knows what other crosses he still has to endure.
That's encouraging for us, because the forgiveness is clearly the bigger miracle, which means we have the authority to do the bigger miracle as pastors.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm struck by
well,
the
then
fact
that's
that,
what I mean.
this guy goes home.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. He goes home. So Jesus says, "Be courageous," and then he goes home. It's reminding me of the end of Return of the King with the hobbits. I mean, after they destroy the One Ring, the book trajectory is so much better, because the rest of the book is about them going home and then conquering their own homes.
Yeah.
That's good. There's that you're making me think about the greater work. So Jesus says this to the disciples in John, chapter 16, right? Greater, you're going to do these works, and greater works than these you will do. And he hinges it on, ask whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will grant to you. And the forgiveness of sins certainly is. I mean, Jesus does the redeeming work, the atoning work, but then he commissions the disciples to be the distributors of to hand this out, and that's where it takes effect. That's where it takes root,
and to the whole world. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, that it's greater in how many more people do the apostles convert, right? Not only in their preaching, but of course in their writings. So I think there's a sense in which he might mean the Bible. The Bible is a greater work than what he did in Jerusalem, in the sense of its scope. Yeah.
Peter certainly thinks so. We were on the mountain with him, but we have God's word more. What does he say? The prophetic word more
sure?
certain, more sure, something like that. Yeah. Which I always took to mean, hey, don't wish that you were on that mountain with us, because we have something far better. And in fact, that experience of coming down from the mountain was pretty miserable for Peter. It's like he comes down from the mountain having wanted to be up there, and then he gets licked like time and again, right? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Get behind me, Satan. And then he, I will die with you, and abandons Jesus at the cross. Just how about let's just have the Bible. Let's not try to do other great things.
Petersen, you ever notice the Greek word for cleverly devised myths in 2 Peter?
No.
It's Sisyphus Menois. And so if you sound that out, it sounds like Sisyphus.
Yeah. Interesting.
And
Huh.
I think there's a great play there because, of course, Sisyphus is the guy who rolls up his rock, or his Petros, if you will, up to the mountain, but he never quite get there, and it keeps rolling back down. But 6 days earlier, when Peter makes this confession, Jesus says, "You are the Petros," and then he actually
Right.
brings him up the mountain, and they experience the glory.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
it's amazing that these fishermen who had no education ended up writing these things. Which,
I
so
know.
speaking about the Bible, miracles throughout the scriptures usually are associated with writing the scriptures. So you think about Moses, he's got miracles, right? With the burning bush and then the leprosy and the plagues. Why? Because God is confirming that you have the authority to write down the scriptures. And then like Elijah and Elisha, same thing. Because if you think about it, for most of human history, there's large gaps with no miracles, even in the Old Testament.
Right.
And then all of a sudden Jesus shows up. Okay, there's this new era, this new epoch. So that must mean that there's going to be some new scriptures being written, which really is the cessationist argument for me. Why don't we have these same kinds of miracles today? Because we don't have the authority to write the Bible. We don't need to write it anymore.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's the cessationist. I'm obviously prone to that. I find myself just hesitant to be dogmatic about it without a Bible passage. But I do think it's funny that, like, we're so suspicious of all of the miracles. I mean, in a modern sense, except demon possession and exorcism. And for some reason, we seem to give that a different category. We have a demon possession in this chapter. There's no demon possession in the Old Testament. No exorcisms recorded. They're in the Gospels, and then Peter and Paul each do one, right? And Lutherans, American Lutherans, do not put demon possession and exorcisms in the same category as the healing miracles or the feeding, any of the others. And clearly there's the fact that there are none in the Old Testament is significant. I think related to what both of you were saying. What David was saying about the demons sort of being afraid and becoming super active. And also, I think, like the plagues, right, also being exposed in their foolishness and their impotence, like Pharaoh, right? And then also what you were saying, Josh, about the writing of the scripture in the new era. But I don't know why if somebody comes in and says he spoke in ecstatic language, unlearned ecstatic languages, I don't believe him for a second, right? And if he says that he laid hands on somebody who was healed, I don't believe him. But if he comes in and says, I think there was a demon in my daughter and I exorcised her, I'm like, well, maybe. I'm much more tolerant of that miracle. I don't know why.
That is interesting because the verbs often are the same. So there's a portion of Luke where Jesus rebukes a demon twice, and then he also rebukes the wind and the waves. So Jesus seems to think the same about them. They both need rebuking.
Does he rebuke the fever in Peter's mother-in-law? Does he do that as well?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right in that section. I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder how much. I mean, thinking about how the air we breathe influences our thinking. I mean, we have watched so many movies about demons.
Yeah.
And and it's just a part of the allure of popular culture to imagine that this kind of embodied evil as an explanation, perhaps. I mean, maybe in some sense it's kind of like it feels like a Manichaean explanation for why things are so bad in the world. It's like, well, there's this power out there, and when we can personify it, it helps make sense of things. I'm thinking about that in relation then to the Old Testament as well. So you do get the notion of demons, that they were offering sacrifices to goat demons in the wilderness, right? And I'm just thinking about the things that the kings would do, like offering up their firstborn child for the construction of Jericho or whatever it might be. In some sense, you don't need demons when the guys are doing the things themselves, right? When they're acting like demons. I wonder. I'm trying to put together. It's really, really hard, I think, to budget for what is acceptable. An acceptable outlook on the world because of what all the movies I've watched, essentially, right?
Well, I mean, I think certainly there's demons in the Old Testament. We have Satan named, right? And but we don't have them. They don't have them taking control of a human being's body, speaking through their voice, throwing them into fires, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Lutheran dogmaticians debated whether or not a Christian could be possessed by a demon. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but some thought if you have saving faith, a demon cannot control you. You could be influenced by demons, some oppression by demons, but you couldn't be controlled. But Luther, it seems, thought you could be. So I don't know.
Huh. That seems hard for me to make sense of, given especially the way Jesus talks about,
right,
driving out the demon and then, cleaning the house and what
spirit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
what did Luther, what was he going after? What did he, I mean, that seems like the kind of thing you might say to offer an explanation for something, like maybe why somebody, why melancholy might overtake a Christian, for instance.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly that. Well, that's, of course, that's kind of that's his biggest fear. I think that Luther thinks despair is the greatest threat to faith. I mean, I'm not going to prove that, but I think that's true. It does seem to me that his, he has I can never tell in his own descriptions of his life events and his battles with the devil. I mean, it doesn't seem like he's speaking metaphorically when he throws the ink pot, for example. That's the famous one. But there's other times where he describes his battles with the devil in a very, kind of physical, literal sort of way. And I don't think it sounds to me like he believes that's exactly what happened. Like he saw an apparition of the devil, and responded to it. But maybe I'm wrong. And, maybe Luther was a little crazy too, I'm willing to say that.
Most geniuses are.
So it is interesting how I always say my big thing on demons is always, it seems like we go to one extreme or the other. We act like they're omniscient. They can hear our silent thoughts. I don't see any reason in the Bible to think that. And that also that they're sort of like, can be omnipresent, that they can be in more than one place at once, which seems contrary not only to what we know about creatures, but also Daniel's account. And then, so we give them too much power, but then at the other side, we sort of dismiss them too easily. Like they're not a real threat or they're sort of cartoons. I thought what you were going to say, but I also don't like this, another kind of modern error. I don't like it when I don't like the language of demons to mean kind of personal struggles, weaknesses, or he's got his demons. And I mean, addiction to alcohol and whatever, gossip. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't feel right to me either, to call those demons.
Do you think there's a grain of truth behind it though?
Well, so I grew up with I had a lot of associations with the Seventh-day Adventist Church as a child, and
it shows.
Well, here's going to be where they are obsessed with demons. So I sat through a lot of Bible studies on demons, and it was all very convincing to me at the time. And maybe I'm reacting, but they had this argument that they based it on, first of all, I am legion. Right? That there's all kinds of demons and they have unique personalities and kind of modes of attacking people. And then the other thing was, so they would say, yes, there's demons that specialize in drunkenness, right? Or whatever it would be. And then they would be called by those names. And there's another passage, but I forgot. Also, some demons only come out by prayer and fasting. So they would take that to mean that like you need the right trick to get the drunk demon out, as opposed to the pornography demon or so I don't know. Maybe there is some truth in it. Who knows?
Well, members of Redeemer, if Petersen starts advocating for a Saturday service, don't do it.
That's right. That's right. And vegetarianism, one of my favorite things.
Do you know your own birthday, or is that kind of suppressed too?
Well,
how old are you? I have no idea. I mean, do you know?
Everybody thinks I'm way older than I am, so I'm just going to leave it there. I guess I act like so cranky all the time. It fools everybody.
Hey, perfect. All right. You guys got anything to say about this calling of Matthew? It's incredibly short. I mean, considering the guy who wrote this, he's kind of self-deprecating because he doesn't give us a whole lot. And then in the next chapter, he includes his profession. He's the only one who does that in the 12. And it's a degrading term because their tax collectors are included with sinners. So it's very humble that he would do this.
Yeah. Well, we don't really get any stories about him, right? Other than this.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. This is his one event. And it is, as you say, I think, a humiliation. I wanted to bring up on that account, this is going to seem really pretentious, maybe more than seems. This is T.S. Eliot, the Four Quartets from East Coast. You know it. You already know it, don't you,
man.
David? I love this so much. I want to tell a story about it. But so here it is. Are you pulling your T.S. Eliot off the shelf? Nice.
I'm just as pretentious as you are. just without the Seventh-day Adventism.
There we go. So I mean, this is so great. I'm going to read the whole thing because it's so beautiful. Some people maybe haven't heard it. The wounded surgeon plies the steel that questions the distempered part. Beneath the bleeding hands we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art resolving the enigma of the fever chart. Our only health is disease if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please, but to remind of our and Adam's curse, and that to be restored our sickness must grow worse. The whole earth is our hospital, endowed by the ruined millionaire, wherein if we do well we shall die of the absolute paternal care that will not leave us, but prevents us everywhere. The chill ascends from feet to knees, the fever sings in mental wires. If to be warmed, then I must freeze and quake in frigid purgatorial fires, of which the flame is roses and the smoke is briars. The dripping blood our only drink, the bloody flesh our only food, in spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood. Again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. That is it's his best thing he ever wrote. There, I'll just say it. Go ahead. You gonna argue with that, Josh?
No. It's beautiful. We'll talk more T.S. Eliot off the air. That'd be great.
Okay.
I love how it connects the fact that God gives us in our ordinary, like, daily life, these analogies, these pictures of how salvation works that are like, they need to be drawn out for us, right? So that to be restored, our sickness must grow worse. You know, like you have a broken bone and it's started to heal crooked. It has to get broken again. Yeah. And like, we understand, or you go to the dentist to have your tooth fixed and they've got to jab that needle with Novocaine in it. Otherwise you couldn't possibly bear what they're going to do to you. And so God bakes that all in, or like a seed, you know, being laid to rest in the ground and dying, or it won't bear abundant fruit. And yet we need the poets to connect it for us, because we just don't believe it. We just don't believe that that's how it should be with God.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, the theological reality is that the creation bears the fingerprints of the creator, right? I think the theological, the kind of personal sin part is, we just see, so here's another weird Petersenism. Where is this? Oh, I can't believe I guess it's in the Revelation to St. John, isn't it? Chapter 7 or chapter 12, where if possible, they will deceive even the elect with their miracles. Right. I am convinced that actually that is science. Science performs all of the miracles that Jesus performed. And that's what deceives us. So, and what it deceives us into is trusting in the wrong things, right? So think about the things that they would be considered miracles completely, what science is doing, but they've got a different explanation other than God's benevolence. And that's the problem. And then we trust in that. So I think why we need the poets is because we see, instead of the creator's fingerprints, we see our own kind of our own reason or our own explanations. And they're just actually as bad, maybe not just as bad, as the kind of, Greek myths in a way.
Yeah.
I think, because if the elect could be deceived? I mean, that's an interesting thing there.
It seems like an ad absurdum, right? Because it adds if possible.
Right.
But it
well,
means
because we're not completely deceived, but I think we are being deceived.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, so what would deceive the elect, or what could, if anything could? It would be something that was so near to the truth that the slight sliver of deviation from the truth was almost indiscernible. And that is very much what science and progress has to offer, right? Life, an abundant life, joy that might be full, right? All of these things. And like acknowledging the horror of death and the horror of crime and wickedness and all of those things, so that it looks so close to reality, so close to the truth about God. Yeah. I was just thinking I just heard this thing yesterday. I don't know if this is related, but it reminded me of it, that this diagnosis of the left and the right, that the left is in love with being smart, and the right is in love with being right. And I was thinking about how both of those things are, so attractive to somebody who's pursuing wisdom, who's pursuing righteousness. It's like here's on offer something that is an approximate, and boy, is it so close, right? Look, we want all our righteous deeds lined up. Look, we want to have knowledge, and we want to to have reason flourish because it's a gift from God, right? And so you just like, it's what's the picture? It's like it's something just sort of snaps into place, but it's off center, and that's what can draw you away, right?
Well, I like how Chesterton puts it, speaking of the poets and orthodoxy. He talks about the virtues being at war, and that's so insightful. He says when society falls apart, it's not only the vices that run rampant, that's obvious, and he uses truth and pity, and I'll use love. So if you want to use those terms, it's like the right is obsessed with the truth, but they don't have any pity. And so what ends up happening is it's not truth anymore, and the left is so obsessed with pity, but there's no truth there, and so it's no longer pity. That's just a different way of saying it.
Yeah, disordered, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of that, sorry, David, I was going to lead us into the next section because it felt natural.
Well, I wanted to talk about this, Elliot, just a little bit more. I want to tell you. Yeah. So this is the point of that I love this, the wounded surgeon. And, because the physician, right, those who have no need of a physician, that's this whole section. So I was going to tell you, so this just happened on Good Friday. Here's a preaching story of preaching gone wrong. So I loved this sermon, but my colleague here did not. I preached on Good Friday, and I tried to use this. And here's how I started the sermon. There are three main ways the wounded surgeon plies the steel of irony in our Lord's passion. First, there are characters who say more than they realize, or whose words have the near opposite meaning of what they think they are saying. There are also a great deal of weaknesses posturing as strength, and at the same time, the strength of Christ being mistaken for weakness or foolishness. Finally, we have those who should know better but don't, and vice versa. We have wisdom arising from unexpected places. Hidden here beneath the wounded surgeon's bleeding hands, faith feels the sharp compassion of the healer's art. By growing sicker, we find a cure. Nobody understood a word of that. It was so, it was just one of these like great, I was so proud of it. And maybe if it was written and somebody was reading it, but just to jump, it was, I just, how it is. Sometimes you get too much T.S. Eliot,
Petersen, I gotta tell you two stories about that. So first is I was considering putting an excerpt of W.B. Yeats in one of my sermons. So I texted Buchs and I say, would it be snotty and pretentious to include this in? And his response was, "Sir, you know." And
well,
my second story is I used to David and I would go back posting YouTube shorts for a while. I need to get back to it because it's really a fun art to take from your sermons. And I posted this one. It got like 7,000 views. It was great. But one of the comments was, that anecdote was terrible. You need to go learn more. Go watch David Petersen's sermons
There you
and learn
go.
and learn more. and now I'm going to juxtapose the comment you just made with his comment, and I hope it goes over well.
There you go. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it is funny how I think all the ideas were right. It was orthodox, but I mean, it was so. I remember even trying to read it and just getting sort of tongue tied because it was too. It just wasn't. It was wrong. So
it'll be great in the volume of collected sermons that's published.
There you go.
Post-mortem.
That's right. Well, I loved the sermon. I think it got a little better from there, but in hindsight, it's crystal clear it was a mistake.
It raises for me all kinds of questions that we don't have time or the wherewithal to talk about them now, but about attention, about about the kind of attention people can give to things. Because in some sense, you primed that for us by like, here's T.S. Eliot, and now I'm going to tell you about this thing gone wrong. And so like my brow was furrowed and I was locked in and I followed what you were saying. And that's really nice, like to have something that demands that kind of attention because it rewards it.
Yeah.
But I regularly think to myself, how much of what even the simplest, clearest things that I'm trying to say, how much of that is actually being received,
Right.
So, which is, I don't like thinking about that because it's kind of scary.
Of course, T.S. Eliot himself has the rebuttal to your sermon, Petersen. He's in the room. The women come and go, talking of Michelangelo.
Well, it's I'm not against stretching them and pushing them, but it needs to be. It still has to be clear. Hopefully, there was some clear things in the sermon. The problem is too, like I remember one time I wrote a whole sermon. I didn't preach it, but so I'm also a big Jason Isbell fan, sort of the T.S. Eliot of country music. And so there's a great song called "We Were Vampires," which I bet neither of you know. So
I don't.
Well, see, that's why I could. So it's a great song. What basically it's this crazy lyric where he says, I can't remember exactly, but if we were he's talking to like theoretically his wife, right? So if we were vampires, then we could just stand out on the sidewalk and smoke and laugh, and we wouldn't have to worry about anything because we'd never die. But the truth is, one of us is going to have to live without the other one, odds are, and it's going to be sad. And that sort of makes this moment that we have together sweeter. That's the song, basically. It's really kind of clever. And so I really wanted to sort of tell that exact story, right, in a sermon. And I did. I mean, I tried to. And thankfully, the Holy Spirit restrained me. And I mean, it took like 3 pages to explain that. And then I was at the end, I was like, this isn't worth it. Because I was going to, of course, make this, but we are going to live forever. You don't have to be a vampire.
Well, you could have done that, or you could have just cited the movie Twilight, and it would have gotten the same.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it is funny how you go off on these tangents, and sometimes wisdom prevails, and other times it doesn't. So,
yeah.
Hey, my whole life's a tangent.
That is true. My whole life is reflecting on this passage from Ezekiel. I love this so much. It says, "As for you," this is Ezekiel 33. "As for you, son of man, your people who talk together about you by the walls and at the doors of the houses say to one another, each to his brother, 'Come and hear what the word is that comes from the Lord.' And they come to you as people come, and they sit before you as my people, and they hear what you say, but they will not do it. For with lustful talk in their mouths they act. Their heart is set on their gain. And behold, you are to them," this is what you sound like to me right now, "behold, you are to them like one who sings lustful songs with a beautiful voice and plays well on an instrument. For they hear what you say, but they will not do it." It's like, oh man.
That's right.
Hey, I got a question about Matthew 9 and the calling. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, put a pin in verse 13 because it's going to show up again in 12:7, where Jesus says, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy." And then he brings it up and he says, "You guys clearly didn't go and learn what this means." And that's your problem.
Yeah. Okay.
But you going to talk about Matthew?
Well, yeah. So I mean, this may seem pedantic or trivial, but I think it's harkening back to the conversation Josh and I had a few weeks ago about kind of thinking the questions people ask and answering the questions that people ask. When so common is reading Matthew 9 with sinners and tax collectors. He eats with tax collectors and sinners. Like take this the simple. Like, then why don't you invite them all to communion? The tax
Right.
collectors and Jesus would have eaten with them. And I think that's connected to what you said, Josh, about verse 13. Their problem in Matthew 9 is that they are neglecting to show mercy to the sinners and the tax collectors, right? So whatever it might be, orthodoxy, truth, cleanness, purity, that's the virtue gone rampant. In our day, though, it's the opposite virtue, right? It's pity, it's empathy, it's no shame, no judgment, whatever it might be. How would you explain that to an inquiring, reader of the Bible? Doesn't this mean that we should invite everybody to communion?
I mean,
Well,
I
first of
usually
all,
go ahead, Josh.
I was going to
Please.
say he says go and learn, like that's the instruction, which is connected to the Great Commission. But I want to hear another Petersonism.
Well, I think I always say, I mean, the problem is with, I mean, to eat with sinners and tax collectors means to eat with the people who recognize themselves as such, right? I mean, he's actually not really eating with Simon. I mean, he's not having communion with Simon. I mean, that would be the other big thing, right? There's a place to talk to these people. It's not at the communion rail, but I mean, he does actually have fellowship with sinners and tax collectors, but they're those who recognize themselves as such. So, right, the left doesn't
Yeah.
recognize themselves as sinners. They're very proud of their good works, right? They're the good people. They like people. They're nice.
Right, and to use this operative metaphor as a physician for doling out the Lord's Supper as a medicine really works out well, and Jesus does it here too. It's like, if you're going to come under my spiritual care, then I'm going to commune with you, recognizing you are sick and you need this medicine. But if you're just a walk-in from the clinic and I have no idea, like, I'm not going to give you the medicine.
Well, I mean, the picture is highly intelligible to anybody who works in the healthcare profession, because like somebody walks up and they say, "I would like some Tylenol with codeine. Please give it to me right now." You're like, "Nope."
Right. And I'm going to have to do some unpleasant things to you, right?
Yes. That's right.
You're going to get worse before you get better, all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay, take us to the next section, Josh.
Well, I want to read it all as one section with this wineskins and the miracle of Jairus and the woman, focusing in on the flute players in verse 23, because the detail really brings it all out. Because what you'll notice is there's a strong number of connections between Matthew 9 and Matthew 11. So namely, you've got dealing with the old and new covenant in both, the role of John the Baptist in both, and then flutes. So Jesus says, you guys are like little children in the marketplace who said, you played the flute for us, but you did not dance, and a dirge, but you did not play the funeral. And there's a great twist that's going on here. It's like, what in the world are they celebrating? Because they're playing flutes at a funeral. It kind of reminds me of celebrations of life. Do you guys know why you call it that? And second of all, like, what in the world are you celebrating? And it's the same thing that's happening here. And they laugh at Jesus because they actually think she's dead. So really, what are they celebrating?
Yeah. Well, the whole wailing thing. Yeah. I mean, I think both of these things, this goes on in modern funerals too. The point of a funeral is to demonstrate to the world how important this person was and how significant of a loss I am feeling about it. I think this is in the African American community, they will express this by actually losing bodily control. So they'll be like following the casket, and they'll be weeping and they'll be overcome and they'll stumble. Right? I don't know if that's a typical kind of African American, behavior, ceremony, whatever. I don't mean that they're doing it like as a show consciously, but I mean, it's just part of it, right? You don't see that with middle-class white people. They're not walking behind the casket and stumbling because they're so filled with grief. But they buy really elaborate, fancy, polished caskets. And, it sort of doesn't make any sense, right? Everybody knows this is kind of a waste of material and effort and expense. But I think it's important to show that this was an important person, right? And somehow to sort of rage against the fact that this person is dead and insist that the life that he lived was really important. But that's, I mean, I get the instinct, but it's so vain. And I think that's what, certainly that's the idea in the Mideast with whaling, with professional whalers. But my suspicion is the flute thing's the same thing, and, I think probably soloists, right? All kinds of, even like amongst Orthodox Lutherans, how many long Lutheran chorales can we sing at a funeral? And to sort of prove, that we're really serious about this.
What's your record?
That's good.
I think I mean I've had to draw the line at 6, which is I think too many. But I mean, they want to do like 10 because they love him so much. And I mean, so do I, but there's some other things to be done this day,
It feels like the parallel, this is maybe harsh, but I'm as you were describing the need to display the importance of this person, I'm thinking about the instructions that people leave behind. Not even say for like an Orthodox Lutheran funeral, but just like, I need you to scatter my ashes, a third at this place and a third at this place. And when you do it in this place, you need to drink this kind of whiskey and so on. And there's like the sense of, I'm going to be dead, but I am going to be asserting myself. I'm reaching my hand out of the grave, and I'm still controlling you.
Yeah.
Which is very different from, hey, let me serve you with a testimony to Christ and what he's done,
Yeah.
Petersen, I was going to ask you if that was the only time that you ever suggested singing How Great Thou Art at a funeral.
I mean, I like to do always the big 3, right? How Great Thou Art, Amazing Grace, and On Eagle's Wings. And thankfully, LSB has them all prominently available.
Unpopular opinion, perhaps, but my only objection to On Eagle's Wings is that it's so dang hard to sing.
Yeah.
So I'm always singing a solo at the funeral.
But then everybody joins in on the chorus.
That's true. Heartfelt.
So I think part of what's going on here is you have this wedding funeral dichotomy that Jesus plays out in chapter 11. And it seems to be he's coming as the bridegroom, particularly with this word fringe in verse 20, because the word kraspedon can also mean tassels, which is what Boaz stretches over Ruth. And the emphasis on the women and the 12 years, Jesus comes to be the bridegroom for Israel first.
Well,
that connects to it connects to the use of that fringe as the necessary part of the garment, referring to God's law that was to be worn by Jewish men, and then the 12, the recurrence of these 12s here, right? Mm-hmm. So his bride Israel is being redeemed. Yeah.
Well, and she's being made fertile.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, she's got something that's right interfering with that. So, I mean, I think that's kind of that's this great thing too about the, the barren women becoming pregnant and then Mary becoming pregnant. That's such an interesting dynamic as well. But this would be like a barren woman, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So then the connection, this is true. I was just checking in Mark and in Luke, this miracle, the Jairus' daughter, and then the woman with the flow of blood is almost immediately followed by the commissioning of the 12 to go out and be a light to their brothers and sisters. And then you get the expansion with the 70 or the 72 later. And what is striking about that unfolding is that they are called to do the works that Jesus is doing, right? Abroad. So it's kind of like here we have this picture of the redemption of the bride, but Jesus is saying like, you guys are going to need to be here to fulfill the rest of the ceremony, right? So like coming next is the apostles who are going to, carry out the work.
That's good. Yeah.
And you have the same thing in the Gospel of John. So you have the wine in chapter 2, and then in John chapter 3, John calls himself the bridegroom. And John the Baptist he's here in Matthew 9. Right?
What do we have? Where is it, Matthew?
Yeah, I don't see. What are you talking about?
Is it 11? We get John the
Oh,
Baptist in
oh,
prison, right?
sorry,
Sending
yeah, and
messengers to,
11, and
yeah.
11, yeah, he's like
Oh,
there.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. So no, verse 14, right? The disciples of John came to him. Why do
There you go.
we and the
Yeah.
Pharisees
Oh,
fast?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're skipping a lot of stuff here, but
yeah,
talk to us.
and because then Jesus talks about the wedding guests in verse 15.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Just tie it all together. And
we only got an hour. I mean, it's our podcast, but I do have to go up to the district convention
Yeah.
or
yeah.
pastor's conference.
So the closing question, Petersen, is always well, I'll let you ask it, Josh. It's your question.
Well, the question is what's grinding your gears, and it's kind of your opportunity to say whatever you want to say. You can talk more about T.S. Eliot or whatever you're reading currently, or if anything is just making you mad and upset. We're here to be your therapists.
Oh, yeah. Good. I've been thinking a lot about endurance and grit, and I think I've been mad about these guys that are quitting. So, of course, if they join the Eastern Orthodox Church, that's particularly offensive and problematic, or, any time they give up the Book of Concord, but also just quitting the ministry too easily. This kind of, I mean, I don't know, it's that we should expect to suffer in the ministry. And I think it's a sacrificial office. We should expect there to be a cost, and we shouldn't be shocked, I guess. So I'm just kind of mad. Maybe that's just cranky old manness, but take your hits, The people aren't perfect. The districts aren't perfect. I mean, all that's not that we shouldn't know what the ideal is and be striving to be better, but don't quit.
Just for what it's worth, I personally appreciate that. I heard you say that recently. I can't remember when or where, but that's, I mean, the self-pity and, like thinking that you deserve something better than what you've got is just, I mean, it's so pernicious. And if the response to that is, well, you don't get to quit. It's like, well, okay, I guess I got to, suck it up and, and carry on. And that's what's remarkable. It's like, I mean, that's exactly what I say to my kids. It's like, yeah,
Right.
this thing hurts you, but I mean, what are we gonna do about it? You still have to, carry on. You got to move on to the next thing. So,
Buchs, I remember you saying to me about 5 years ago at a pastor's conference, you said, man, before we do anything else, we just all need to do a bunch of calisthenics. Yeah.
At the pastor's conference in particular needs to do calisthenics.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's encouraging. I agree with you. I've had a number of classmates and people around my age who have now joined the Eastern Orthodox Church, and I just don't get it. It's not a temptation to me. Maybe it's because I didn't grow up Seventh-day Adventist. I grew up in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in a very different congregation. Like my congregation growing up was huge. We had 1,000 members, and so I know the gamut of the synod just growing up with it. So it doesn't disturb me. I want to make it better, but this is home, and so I'm not gonna quit. That's just not in my DNA. But thanks for the encouragement. Buchs, what's grinding your gears?
Let's see. Ascension Day is coming up, and I feel like I have in my announcements encouraging people to come to our Ascension Day evening service. I feel like I've already preached my sermon several times over, so I have to figure out what else to say when when I get to Ascension Day. and honestly, that does grind my gears a bit. I feel I'm indicting myself by saying this. I feel by this time of the year just a real creative slump. And I mean, and looking ahead at the calendar, I'm going to have Pentecost, and then I'm going to have Holy Trinity, and it feels like it's so much of all of the same thing. And that's just due to my own lack of imagination, right, and my own disenchantment with the scriptures. But that's grinding my gears. My own weaknesses there are grinding my gears. What about you, Reber?
Well, I'm reading another Gene Wolfe book. Petersen, you ever heard of Gene Wolfe, sci-fi writer?
No.
He's really good, Roman Catholic, kind of a writer's writer, and toys with unreliable narrators, and forces a lot on the reader. And so I've got to be in the right mood to kind of read him. but I'm really enjoying it. It's called Lake of the Long Sun, and it's the second book here in a series. And I need to start reading Goethe. Buchs, do you wanna read Faust with me? You wanna try it again?
I gave that a good solid. I read half of it, and I don't think I need to experience that again. Actually,
Bro, Petersen's right here. He just said don't quit, and here you are.
There are some things I will gladly quit. What was I don't even remember the name of the novel which began my quitting when it came to reading.
It was Absalom, you big, you big wiener. You quit like your hair follicles did about 5 years ago.
There you go. All right, thank you. Hey, we really appreciate you joining us, David. This has been fun.
That was fun for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to hit stop.